welcome to the studio here at African Utility Week. I'm Claire Folkvane, I'm the editor of Metering and Smart Energy International, and today I'm really pleased to welcome Jodie Sherwin-Hill, who's the founder and partner of Jomat Investments. Jodie, thanks so much for taking the time to join me today. It's always so great to see you. Now, we've been talking a little bit about revenue protection, why it's so important. I mean, we know that unless something is effectively measured and managed, you're not going to be deriving the proper revenue from it. You have been doing quite a lot of work on the customer side of that equation. Can you maybe talk a little bit about why that customer engagement is so important?
Yes, thanks Claire. Yeah, it's actually, it's really exciting to know that there's such a great link between the customer and revenue. And I think that's the first thing I'd love to say is that if you get that link right, then you're going to naturally have an increase in your revenue. And not only in your revenue, but in your engagement with the customer going forward, the retention of that customer. And I think the one thing that I definitely know is that we have to know what's important to the customer. So one of the things we tend to do is rush into something. We want to implement a project, and we need to implement those projects. But actually, if we just take a step back and really learn what's important to the customer, by going into the environment and finding out what's not only important to the individual customer, but what's important to the community. So as an example, one of the questions that we've been practicing asking is, if you had money left over or spare money, what would you spend that money on?
Okay.
And when I know what the individual will spend the money on, so an example is I'd spend it on my family, taking them out for dinner. Or I would go with my mates to watch a football match. So I like sports watching, or that's one of my hobbies. Other people say, well, I'd like to do it with the church. You know, we found that a lot. Mm-hmm. And then it starts to indicate to us, those individuals put together, what's most important to that community. And that means we know how to speak to our customer. And I think that's one of the most critical steps that we've taken that's seen exponential results, you know, in engaging with the customer, because now we can get them on board. Because most of the time we go in and we're guessing, you know, that it's important for them, or we don't even know what the environment needs, so we haven't investigated properly, you know. But if you do your homework first and spend some time on that, and you find fast ways of doing that, then you actually can walk right in there and there's an immediate result. Immediately the customer becomes that custodian. Immediately the customer wants to be involved.
I do have to throw a little bit of a spanner in the works here and ask, for somebody where sport is important to them, how does that direct your engagement with them?
Yeah, so if sports watching is important with them, so if I say to them, you know what you're spending your money on, then I know what do I need to do and I'm going to go straight into electricity point of view.
Yeah.
Like it would be important that they can watch the game, that there's quality power delivered to wherever they're watching that game from. Okay. So I'm able to link that, okay, so if we're able to pay and understand how to make sure that we've got quality power and there's an exchange of money to receive that quality power, we're going to be able to give you TVs, you know, that are able to be on time when the match is on, where you can enjoy it with your friends.
Okay.
But so we're linking the two together. So when we engage with the customer, or let's say the ward councillor engages with the customer, then we're able to link what's most important as a collective to them to actually the implementation or the project we're trying to deliver on. Yeah.
Oh, there's obviously a lot more than just identifying what's important to the people within the community. And you mentioned to me that having a champion within the community is absolutely vital. So my question to you is, how do you identify your champions? And then how do you get them to work on behalf of you and the community?
Yes. That's been an interesting journey. A lot of lessons learned along the way. But one of the quickest routes that we have found is the ward councillors, especially in South Africa, you know, because that's common, or the chief or the ward councillor. That's what you're kind of looking at, those two angles. Because at the end of the day, generally speaking, if that ward counsellors, they're from that community, they understand that community better than you do, and the people generally will trust them. Another angle we've used is finding a champion such as the priest or the pastor. You know, if it's a big community with lots of churches, then we'll go to the organisation and we'll actually engage there. But what the most important thing that we found is it's not only about engaging, it's that one-to-one engagement with the ward council to say you're important and what we've got coming is very important to this community, but first we want to know from you what's important to the community, not only, but for you to understand so that you don't get surprised when someone comes to you to say something's happening that you're not aware of. So we want you to have the most amount of information, and immediately these people feel really empowered and they want to be that custodian for you. So instead of us coming in from the outside, we're looking for people on the inside that have influence, that can actually, so that we can have that one-to-one relationship with, feed them information and let them rather feed the information in their own way, in their own language, to the community. Yeah.
When we were talking, there was obviously a lot of discussion around the time that this pre-preparation, if I can put it like that, takes to get a community bought in. But we've also seen globally that where a community is not on board with either revenue protection or metering programs,
Yes.
most of the time they will either fail or significantly fail to deliver on the promise of the technology.
Absolutely.
So besides the community engagement, are there any other quick wins? You know, I mean, at the end of the day as well, utilities don't have infinite amounts of money that they can spend on all sorts of engagement or pre-planning. What other short-term wins can they implement to help move a project forward to a better defined, successful conclusion?
Yeah, so that's been also interesting. One of the things that I've picked up is we tend to have a business process about how we do things. So I like to say the operating environment, like what we're doing as a service provider, as an organization, as a utility, what we tend to do is that I like to think of it as the core of the apple. And if we don't get the core of the apple with clear process flows, like a clear support model, like a clear way of how we're going to implement, and we don't transfer that skill internally first, it's almost like the core is rotten, and that makes the whole apple rotten as well. So one of the quick wins is to first sort out the core, which is the actual operating environment. It's me, it's internally. What can I do to make my processes and skill roll down fast? So one of the other things we do is we have this idea around teach the teacher, and this can be used on a community level, from stakeholder to stakeholder. So anytime I see a stakeholder, because I want to make sure that my operating environment, my transactional environment, and my contextual environment, which is my economic, political forces, are all sort of being considered in this thing. And one of the things we've found is the quickest way to get information or to get processes quickly to go through right to the bottom line, or to the bottom of an organization, or to the laborer that's employed, that's actually putting the meter in, you know, that's digging the hole. And what we found is those quick wins are very simple. Get them to teach each other, because that's empowering. So that's like a 1 to 5 roll down. And studies have shown that when you teach someone else, you have a 90% retention of what you've taken in there. Whereas if I'm sort of communicating, whether it be to my staff internally with my core, my operating environment, or even to a stakeholder, most of the information gets lost, usually about 80%. You take away 20%. But if I now have to transfer and teach someone else, I remember 90% of it, because I have to know what I'm saying, and I have to learn something, and then I have to communicate it to someone else.
Okay, so it's not just about transferring skills from one person to another, but it's about embedding new skills within the teachers themselves.
Yes.
Ah, that's very clever.
Yes, and that has been not only highly successful, but it's exceptionally fast to roll down, because now you start multiplying. If you start multiplying it, one person teaches up to 5 what they're comfortable with. So now I'd say, I'm only comfortable to teach Claire because she's my friend and I work with her all the time. So you do a 1-to-1. but others will do 1 to 5, and then those 5 do 5 more. So what happens is, instead of having to book workshops or sessions and then redo, it's very fast, the transfer of skills. So that means that we're developing skills across the board, but we're also communicating messages as well. We use the same channel to do both. And I think one of the things that I found is there's a fear around, number one, transferring skills sometimes, because people will know more than me or they might be better than me. There's that fear.
Okay, yes,
and
I
then
can
there's
understand
also the fear that, of the time and the cost involved. What if I'm actually truly honest, let's say with the customer? What if I'm honest with my staff about the drawbacks of what's going to happen here, of the things that we expect to go wrong? What if we give them the whole picture? And what we found is the quickest route is to give the complete picture so that you don't create unrealistic expectations.
Yes. Yeah.
And when you give that complete picture, you're actually having a focused growth path, and that's the quickest route.
So I imagine when you are working on the teach the teacher element of your program, that there has to be some measurement of checking the quality and potentially redirecting people's focus every now and again.
Yes.
And is that something then that is coming from higher down management, so that everybody is ultimately involved in the teaching of somebody else? And
yes. So everybody teaches, even at the last mile. So even a labourer, they will teach each other because there's nowhere else to go. So they teach each other for that retention part. But it also builds confidence. Because when I retain something new and I remember it, I feel confident. I want to take on more. But there is the quality check, and the quality check must always happen at the last mile.
yeah.
And that quality check gives us feedback to say, do we need to tweak the top? Is there something going wrong? Is there someone that's like missing a piece of information along that route? So it's like a golden thread that we're pulling through from the top all the way down to the bottom. So you practice that and you see, how do we get that right? And what I've found is the best thing is teach people how to teach.
Moving a little bit over to a related but slightly different topic, and that is around change.
Yes.
I know that you do not consider yourself a change manager, but
No.
a change educator.
Yes.
So as
Getting into it now, Claire.
as an educator,
Yes.
how do you deal with people that are absolutely resistant to the changes that have to occur?
They're only resistant because they do not see how this change serves what's important to them. So it comes immediately back to my awareness campaign is not making only them aware of the change, which is what we tend to make the mistake of, but to get aware of what's important to them. So it's a two-way communication. Yeah.
So when you are engaging with a community, it's important not to come in with just a single message, but with multiple messages for the variety of demographics.
Correct. And so, for example, if we could get personal, people can't help but tell you what's most important to them in the first 60 seconds of meeting them. They can't help but drop it in as a conversation. So you could be standing here and there's been a multitude of talks, you've done interviews, people will drop in what's most important to them. Somehow it makes its way into the conversation. So for example, I would want to know that family is important to you.
Yes.
And 70% you can guarantee is that. So how do I make sure I'm talking to that? Because if I just go in and say, oh, you're going to save money, people aren't going to be interested. I need to connect with them with what's important to them. And the only reason they're resistant is I haven't made that connection.
Okay.
So I can flip it immediately when I know who they are because I know I make the connect. And then all I do is link it in.
Jodie, unfortunately, we've run out of time. I could sit and chat to you all afternoon. As you know, we've done this more than once. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit with us and just have a chat. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
From African Utility Week, I'm Claire Falkvane. Thanks so much for joining us.